Captain Lee Minho stood on the bridge of the New Dawn and watched his ship die around him. The lights flickered every few seconds. The air recyclers made strange grinding sounds. Warning alarms had been beeping for so many hours that his crew had stopped hearing them. Captain, the main engine is down to 12% power. Engineer Kim Hyan called out from his station. His voice was tired. They were all tired. If we push it any harder, we might lose it completely. Lee nodded, but said nothing. What was there to say? They were 3 months into deep space with nowhere to go. The Galactic Council had made their decision clear. Humanity was no longer welcome in civilized space. One diplomatic mistake with the Vorthon Empire, and suddenly 50,000 innocent people were sentenced to die in the cold void between stars. Park Jisoo entered the bridge. Her medical uniform was stained and wrinkled. She had been working without rest for days. The look on her face told Lee everything he needed to know before she even spoke. The children in Section C are getting sicker, she said quietly. The radiation shielding in that area failed yesterday. I moved them to Section A, but we're running out of safe spaces. The medicine I gave them will help for maybe 2 more days. Lee felt something cold settle in his stomach. The children. Always the children suffered first when ships started failing. He had seen it before during the colony wars. Young bodies could not handle the radiation and system failures like adults could. How many, he asked. 43 kids under age 10. It'd be twice that number of older children showing early symptoms. Park rubbed her eyes. Captain, if we don't get help soon? She did not need to finish. Lee understood. In 4 days, maybe 5, they would start losing people. The youngest first, then the old and sick. After that, it would be everyone else. Dan. Any word from the distress beacon? Lee asked communications officer, Sun Nayeon. Nayeon shook her head. Nothing, sir. We've been broadcasting for 2 weeks. Either nobody is listening, or nobody cares. Lee suspected it was both. The galaxy had made it clear that humanity's problems were humanity's alone now. They had burned their bridges when they refused to hand over the mining rights that the Vorthons demanded. It seemed like a small thing at the time. It's just some asteroid belt that humans had found first. But the Vorthons were not used to being told no. They had friends in high places. Captain Kim called out again. The food processors in Section D just went offline. It's 3 of our 4 main food systems down. Lee closed his eyes for a moment. Every hour brought new problems. Every system that failed made their situation worse. The New Dawn had been humanity's pride once. A massive colony ship designed to carry 50,000 people to new worlds. Now, it was becoming their tomb. Sir, we're getting something on the long-range sensors, Nayeon suddenly said. Her voice carried a hint of excitement that Lee had not heard in weeks. Small ship, maybe single pilot. Coming in fast from Sector 7, Lee felt his heart jump. Can you tell who it is? Unknown design. Not human, not Vorthon, not any of the council races I recognize. Nayeon worked her controls. They single quotes. Ah, there. Heading straight for us. Everyone on the bridge went quiet. In deep space, unknown ships usually meant pirates or worse. The New Dawn had no weapons worth mentioning. They were colonists, not soldiers. If someone wanted to hurt them, there was nothing they could do to stop it. Are they responding to our distress signal? Lee asked. Negative. No communications yet. Nayeon paused. Wait, they're slowing down, coming alongside our port side. Lee moved to the main view screen. Through the static and interference from their failing systems, he could make out a small ship. It was sleek and silver, with curves that reminded him of sea creatures from Earth's oceans. Nothing like the sharp angles of human or Vorthon designs.
Captain.
Nayeon's voice was barely above a whisper. They're trying to communicate. Audio only. Put it through. The speakers crackled with static. Then a voice came through, speaking in accented but clear human language. Human vessel, New Dawn. I am Kretel, of the Nathari. I received your distress signal. Do you require assistance? Lee felt his legs go weak. Someone had heard them. Someone Had come? This is Captain Lee Minho. Yes, we desperately need help. Our engines are failing, and we have sick children aboard. I understand. I am coming aboard your ship now. Please prepare your docking bay. Lee looked at his crew. They all had the same expression of hope mixed with disbelief. After weeks of silence from the galaxy, someone had actually come to help them. Sir Kim said softly, "Should we be worried? We don't know anything about the Nathari. Right now, I'll take help from anyone willing to give it," Lee replied. 20 minutes later, Lee stood in docking bay 3, watching the airlock cycle open. The first thing he noticed was that their visitor was small, maybe 4.5 feet tall. The second thing was that Kretel looked ancient. His skin was pale blue-green and covered in fine scales. His eyes were large and dark, full of intelligence and something that looked like sadness. Captain Lee Kretel said with a slight bow, "I'm sorry to see you in such difficulty." "Thank you for coming," Lee said. "But I have to ask, why did you help us?" The council made it clear that helping humanity would have consequences. Kretel's expression grew even sadder. "My people, the Netheri. We have learned that sometimes the right thing and the safe thing are not the same. Your children are dying." "Yes. Yes. Radiation exposure from our failing shields. Our medical officer says we have maybe days before we start losing them." Kretel nodded slowly. "I have medical supplies on my ship. Not much, but enough to help the children. I also have spare parts that might fix your shields temporarily." Lee felt tears start to form in his eyes. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing," Kretel said simply. "Life is precious in the void, Captain. All life, even human life, despite what some in the galaxy believe right now. But your people, won't they be angry with you for helping us?" Large eyes seemed to twinkle. "The Nathari have a saying. When you see someone drowning, you do not ask their name before throwing them a rope. You throw the rope first." Over the next 6 hours, Kretel worked alongside the human crew. His medical supplies stopped the children's sickness. His spare parts got their shields working again. But most importantly, he gave them something they had almost lost: hope. As he prepared to leave, Kretel handed Lee a small data chip. "The coordinates to a world beyond the galactic border. It is far from here, but it is safe. The soil is good, and the air is breathable for humans. No one else claims it."
"How can we ever repay you?" Lee asked.
Kretel smiled, showing sharp white teeth. "Survive, Captain.
"I'll live well."
Raise your children to be good people. That is payment enough." As Lee watched the small silver ship disappear into the darkness, he made himself a promise. Humanity would remember this kindness. Somehow, someday, they would find a way to repay the debt they owed to one small alien who had thrown them a rope when they were drowning in the void. 3 years had passed since Kretel saved the dying humans in deep space. The world they now called Haven looked nothing like the empty planet they had first landed on. Where once there had been only grass, plains, and small forests, now stood a thriving city of nearly 100,000 people. Mayor Cho Siongwa walked through the busy streets of New Seoul, the capital city they had built near the landing site of the New Dawn. The morning air smelled of fresh bread from the bakeries and clean water from the fountains. Children ran past him on their way to school, laughing and playing games. Hard to believe these were the same people who had almost died in the cold of space. "Good morning, Mayor," called out Baker Kim Taeon as he opened his shop. "The grain harvest from the southern farms came in yesterday. Best crop we've had yet." Seongwa smiled and waved back. Every day brought new signs that humanity was not just surviving on Haven, but growing stronger. The planet's soil was rich and the climate was mild. More importantly, being alone here had forced them to work together in ways they never had before. He continued his walk toward the government building where the morning council meeting would take place, as Mayor Seongwa had to keep track of everything happening in their new world. There was always plenty happening. At the medical center, Dr. Yang Minji was already at work in her laboratory. She had been Dr. Park's assistant back on the New Dawn, but now she ran the entire research division for the colony. The lab was filled with equipment they had built themselves using materials from Haven and parts salvaged from their old ship. "Any progress on the energy project?" asked her assistant, lab technician Li Guan. Minji looked up from the strange crystal she had been studying. It was one of many they had found deep in Haven's mountains. The crystals seemed to store energy in ways that human science could not fully explain yet. More than I expected, Minji said with excitement in her voice. These crystals can hold 10 times more power than our best batteries. If we can figure out how to use them properly, we might be able to build things that would amaze the galaxy. The research division had made breakthrough after breakthrough since arriving on Haven. Without access to galactic trade or technology, they had been forced to invent everything from scratch. Instead of making them weaker, this had made them stronger. Human creativity had flourished when given real challenges to solve. Across the city, Admiral Lee Min-ho stood in the command center of their small spaceport. He was no longer just a captain. The Colony Council had promoted him to admiral when they started building their own fleet of ships. It was a small fleet, only 12 vessels so far, but each one was better than anything humanity had built before.
Admiral.
The new ship is ready for its test flight, reported Captain Moon Ji-wan, one of his most trusted officers. Lee nodded and walked over to the window that looked out at their newest creation. The ship was sleek and beautiful, built using lessons they had learned from both human engineering and alien technology they had studied. Most importantly, it incorporated the energy crystals that Dr. Yang's team had mastered. "What are you calling her?" Lee asked. "The Gratitude," Moon replied. "I thought it was fitting." Lee smiled. Everything they built, everything they achieved, was built on the foundation of one alien's kindness. He would never forget that. None of them would. In his private office, Lee kept a special file that he called the Debt Registry. It was a detailed record of everyone who had helped humanity. During their darkest hours, Kretel's name was at the top of the list. Along with everything they knew about him and his people, the Nathari, the registry was more than just a list. It was a promise. Humanity would remember who had helped them, and someday when they were strong enough, they would repay those debts. Sir Communications Officer Sun Naeon entered his office with a tablet in her hands. "We're getting reports from our listening posts. There's something happening in Nathari space." Lee felt his stomach tighten. For 3 years, they had been monitoring galactic communications from their hidden world. They learned about wars, trade, disputes, and political changes. But they had been especially careful to track any news about the Nathari. "What kind of something?" Lee asked. "The Vorthon Empire has been expanding again. They've taken 3 more systems in the past 6 months. And now they're making demands on smaller species." Neon's face was grim. "The Nathari are one of them." Lee stood up quickly. "Show me everything." They walked to the communication center where the colony's best analysts worked around the clock. The walls were covered with star maps and data, screens showing the political situation across the galaxy. "Here's what we know," said intelligence analyst Shin Dong-ha, pointing to a map of Nathari space. "The Vorthons want the Nathari to give up their homeworld and move to smaller planets under Vorthon control. They're calling it a relocation for mutual benefit." "That's the same thing they tried with us," Lee said darkly, "except we told them." "No, the Nathari are peaceful people," Naeem added. "They don't have a military. They've never fought a war. If the Vorthons decide to take their world by force," she didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what happened to species that couldn't defend themselves against the Vorthon Empire. They became slaves, or they disappeared entirely. That evening, Lee called an emergency meeting of the Colony Council. The council chamber was packed with representatives from every part of their society. Farmers, engineers, doctors, teachers, and soldiers all gathered to discuss what they had learned. "The question before us is simple," Lee began. "Do we have a duty to help the Nathari?" "With respect, Admiral," said Councilmember Park Ji-soo, "what can we do? We're one small colony with a handful of ships. The Vorthon Empire has thousands of warships." "The doctor is right," added Councilmember Kim Hyeon. "We've built something amazing here, but we're still not strong enough to fight a galactic empire." Other council members nodded in agreement. It seemed reasonable, practical, safe. But Mayor Seong-hwa stood up slowly. The chamber went quiet as everyone waited to hear what their elected leader would say. 3 years ago we were dying in space," Seong-hwa said quietly. 50,000 humans, including hundreds of children, were going to die because our ship was broken and no one in the galaxy cared enough to help us. He paused and looked around the room at faces he had known for years. These people had been through everything together. One alien cared. One small alien in a tiny ship risked everything to save us. He didn't ask what we could give him. Didn't worry about making enemies. He just helped because it was the right thing to do. The chamber remained silent. Everyone remembered that day. Everyone remembered how close they had come to losing everything. Kretel saved us when we were weak, Seonghwa continued. Now his people need saving. Maybe we're still not strong enough to fight the Vorthins directly, but we're not the same. People who almost died on that broken ship, we've grown, we've learned. We've built things that would surprise the galaxy. Admiral Lee stood up. What are you suggesting, Mayor? I'm suggesting that we find out exactly how strong we've become, Seonghwa replied. And if there's any way we can help the Netheri, we take it. We don't abandon the people who saved us. Dr. Yang Mingyi, who had been quiet throughout the meeting, suddenly spoke up. Mayor, Admiral, what if I told you that our new energy systems could power weapons and shields that are better than anything the galaxy has seen? The room erupted in surprised conversations. Lee held up his hand for quiet. Explain, he said. We've been so focused on building a peaceful colony that we haven't explored the military applications of our technology, Mingyi said. But the crystals, the new engines, the manufacturing techniques we've developed, we could build a fleet that fights unlike anything the Vorthins have ever faced. Captain Moon stepped forward. Sir, the test flights of our new ships have shown capabilities that are ... remarkable. They're faster than anything we've built before. More maneuverable, and the energy efficiency is incredible. Admiral Lee looked around the chamber. 3 years ago, these people had been refugees begging for help. Now they were talking about challenging one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, all in favor of exploring our military options. Lee asked. Every hand in the chamber went up. As the meeting ended and people filed out, Lee remained in his chair, thinking about what they had just decided. They were no longer the helpless humans who had been cast out of galactic society. They had become something new, something stronger. The question was whether they had become strong enough to repay the debt they owed to a kind alien who would save them when no one else would. Only time would tell. Ambassador Sun Naeon sat in the communications center of Haven's intelligence facility, her headphones tight against her ears as she listened to the crackling signals from across the galaxy. For the past 2 years, she had been humanity's eyes and ears in galactic affairs. Every day she monitored news broadcasts, diplomatic channels, and emergency frequencies to keep track of what was happening in the wider universe. Today something was different. The usual chatter from trade routes and planetary governments had an edge of fear to it. Words like ultimatum and evacuation kept appearing in multiple languages across dozens of channels. Director Bay, she called to Wu Jin, who was reviewing. Intelligence reports at another station. I'm picking up increased military traffic from Vorthon space. Something big is happening. Wu Jin walked over to her station. As director of Haven's intelligence division, he had learned to read the subtle signs that meant trouble was coming. The patterns Naeon was showing him looked familiar and dangerous. How long since the traffic started increasing? He asked. 3 days ago, but in the last 6 hours, it's gotten much worse. Naeon adjusted her equipment to clear up the signal. Wait, I'm getting something on the emergency diplomatic frequency. The speakers filled with static, then cleared to reveal a voice speaking in the formal tones used for official galactic communications. But underneath the formal words, there was something else. Desperation. This is the Netheri diplomatic mission. Broadcasting on all emergency channels, the voice said. Our people are in immediate danger. The Vorthan Empire has given us 7 days to evacuate our homeworld or face military action. We request assistance from any members of the galactic community who value peace and justice. Naeon felt her heart stop. She looked at Director Bay, whose face had gone pale. Keep recording, he said quietly. Get everything, the message continued. The Vorthins claim our world has strategic minerals necessary for galactic security. They offer relocation to smaller worlds under their protection. But we know what Vorthon protection means. It means slavery. It means the end of our people as a free species. There was a pause, filled only with static. Then the voice continued, and both humans recognized it immediately. This is Kretel, speaking for the Nathari High Council. If anyone receives this message, please remember that we have always chosen peace. We have never harmed another species. We have helped others when we could, even when it was dangerous for us. Now we need help. Our children, our elders, our entire civilization faces extinction. We do not ask for soldiers to die for us. We ask only that someone remember we existed and that we tried to do good in the galaxy. The transmission ended with coordinates for Nathari space and a repetition of their plea for help. Naheen sat in stunned silence. Beside her, Director Bay was already reaching for the emergency communication system that would alert Admiral Lee and the Colony Council. "Sir," Nayan said quietly, "they're the ones who saved us." "I know," Bay replied. "And now, we have to decide what we're going to do about it." Within an hour, the colony's leadership had gathered in the emergency council chamber. Admiral Lee stood at the head of the table, his face grim as he looked at the assembled representatives of humanity's new world. "You've all heard the transmission," Lee began. "The Nathari have 7 days before the Vorthons attack their homeworld. The question is whether we can help them." "Admiral, with respect, we have maybe 20 ships that are ready for combat," said Fleet Captain Moon Juan. "Intelligence reports say the Vorthons are sending at least 500 warships to Nathari space. The math doesn't work." "The captain is right," added Defense Minister Kim Hyan. "Our ships are advanced, but we don't have enough of them. We don't know how they'll perform in actual combat against Vorthon technology." Mayor Siangwa leaned forward in his chair. "So we're just going to let them die? After everything they did for us?" "No one wants that," replied Dr. Yang Minji. "But we have to be realistic. If we attack the Vorthons and lose, we all die. Every human on Haven, the children we saved, the civilization we built, everything gone." The room fell silent as everyone considered the impossible choice. Save the aliens who had saved them and risk everything, or stay safe and let good people die. Admiral Lee walked to the large window that showed Haven's capital city. Lights twinkled in the darkness as 100,000 humans went about their evening routines. Families having dinner, children doing homework. People living peaceful. Lived because one alien had been brave enough to help strangers. Director Bailey said without turning around, "What do our intelligence reports tell us about Vorthon military capabilities?" "They're formidable," Bay replied, consulting his tablet, "but they haven't fought a real war in over 20 years. Most of their recent conflicts have been against species that couldn't fight back. They're used to overwhelming their enemies with numbers and superior technology." "What about tactics, strategy, traditional?" "They rely on large fleet formations and direct assault. Nothing particularly creative." Bay paused. "Sir, are you thinking what I think you're thinking?" Lee turned back to face the council. "I'm thinking that the Vorthons have never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. They don't know how we think or how we fight." "Admiral," said Captain Moon, "even if our tactics are superior, we're still outnumbered 25 to 1. "Numbers aren't everything," Lee replied. "Dr. Yang, how confident are you in our technological advantages?" Minji looked uncomfortable with the attention, but she answered clearly. "Our energy weapons are 30% more efficient than standard. Galactic models? Our shields can absorb more punishment. Our engines allow for maneuvers that should be impossible according to conventional physics." "Should be impossible," repeated Intelligence Chief Shin Dong-ha. "That might be our edge. If we can do things the Vorthons think are impossible, we can surprise them." Mayor Siangwa stood up slowly. "I think we're missing the most important question here. Not whether we can win, but whether we should try." Everyone looked at him. The elected leader of their civilian government, his opinion carried special weight. 3.5 years ago, I was a mining engineer on a dying ship," Siangwa continued. "My daughter was sick from radiation poisoning. We were all going to die, and no one in the galaxy cared. Then a small alien in a tiny ship risked everything. To save us, not because we could pay him, not because we were allies, just because it was the right thing to do. He looked around the room at faces he had worked beside for years, people who had helped build their new world from nothing. Kretel saved my daughter's life. He saved all our children. If we don't at least try to save his people, then what kind of people are we? What kind of civilization have we really built here? The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Dr. Park Ji-soo, the colony's chief medical officer, spoke up. The mayor is right. Can't let them die without trying to help. But we also can't throw away the lives of our people on a hopeless mission. She paused, then continued with growing conviction. What if we don't fight the way they expect us to fight? Explain, said Admiral Lee. The Vorthons are expecting either surrender or traditional resistance. A big fleet battle where they can use their numbers. What if we give them something completely different? What if we fight like humans? Captain Moon leaned forward with interest. Tactic. Cut to hit and run attacks. More than that, Park replied. What if we turn their advantage into a disadvantage? A fleet of 500 ships is powerful, but it's also slow and hard to coordinate. Our smaller fleet could move faster, strike where they don't expect, and disappear before they can respond. Director Bay nodded slowly. It could work.
Our
Ships are fast enough to outrun anything they have. And with our advanced sensors, we could track their fleet while staying invisible to them. We could rescue civilians while their military is busy chasing us, added Mayor Seonghwa. Even if we can't defeat their entire fleet, we might be able to save Netheri's lives. Admiral Lee looked around the table, could see the change in everyone's expressions. They were no longer talking about whether to help the Netheri, but how. To do it successfully. All right, Lee said finally. We're going to try, but we're going to be smart about it. This isn't just about repaying a debt anymore. This is about showing the galaxy that humanity has returned, and we're not the same species they threw away. He walked back to the window, looking out at the city they had built together. Dr. Yang, I want every ship we have upgraded with our best technology. Captain Moon, start planning unconventional attack strategies. Director Bay, I need to know everything about Vorthon fleet movements and Nethari evacuation routes. Lee turned back to face his people. Someone get me a direct communication line to Nethari space. It's time to let Kretel know that his old human friends haven't forgotten his kindness. As the council members hurried to their tasks, Admiral Lee remained at the window. In 7 days, humanity would either announce their return to galactic affairs with a stunning victory, or they would die trying to repay a debt of gratitude. Either way, the galaxy was about to learn that humans never forgot who helped them in their darkest hour. Director Bae Woojin stood in the middle of Haven's most secret facility, watching his life's work come to completion. The underground complex stretched for miles beneath the mountains north of New Seoul. For 3 years, humanity's best engineers and scientists had been building something the galaxy had never seen before. Final systems check complete, announced Chief Engineer Lim Soo-ben from her control station. All ships are ready for deployment. Bae smiled as he looked at the massive display screens showing their hidden fleet. What the galaxy didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this day since they first arrived on Haven. Not preparing for war, but preparing to defend the defenseless. The human fleet consisted of 212 vessels. Each one unlike anything in galactic space. Where other species built their ships like flying fortresses, thick and heavily armored, human ships looked almost alive. They were sleek and curved, designed to move through space like dolphins swimming through water. Show Admiral Lee the dimensional. Fold system, Bae ordered. On the main screen, one of their ships seemed to flicker and disappear. Then it reappeared several thousand kilometers away in the blink of an eye. How is that possible? Asked Admiral Lee, who had just arrived to inspect their secret weapon. Dr. Yang's energy crystals, explained Chief Engineer Lim. We discovered that when properly configured, they can create temporary tiers in space itself. Our ships can step through these tiers and appear somewhere else almost instantly. Lee stared at the screen in amazement. How far can they jump?
Ow.
In a single fold, about 50,000 kilometers, but they can make multiple jumps in sequence. Human ship could cross an entire solar system in minutes while enemy ships are still trying to figure out where it went. Captain Moon Juan, who had been quietly studying the technical specifications, looked up with excitement. "Admiral, do you understand what this means? We can appear anywhere we want, strike fast, and disappear before the enemy can respond. It's like being invisible." "Better than invisible," added Wing Commander Shin Dong-ha, the leader of their fighter squadrons. "Invisible ships can still be detected eventually. Ships that can teleport can't be tracked at all." Admiral Lee walked through the facility, examining each type of vessel in their fleet. The largest ships were their battle cruisers, sleek vessels, about half the size of traditional galactic warships, but carrying twice the firepower thanks to their advanced energy weapons. The medium ships were fast attack craft, designed to work in small groups, striking multiple targets simultaneously. And the smallest were the fighters, single-pilot craft that could fold through space individually, making them nearly impossible to intercept. "What about our crews?" Lee asked. "Do we have enough trained personnel?" "Every person on Haven who wanted to learn space combat has been training for 2 years," replied Captain Moon. "We have 15,000 qualified ship crew members and 3,000 fighter pilots. Not as many as we'd like, but enough." Lee nodded. The entire population of Haven was barely 100,000 people. Having 18,000 of them ready for space combat was remarkable, but it also meant they were risking nearly 1 in 5 of their people on this mission. Admiral called communications specialist Chen Min-jae from her station. "We're receiving updated intelligence from our listening posts. The Vorthan fleet has left their home systems and is heading toward Nethari space." "How many ships?" Lee asked. 837 combat vessels, sir. Led by Admiral Kasara aboard the flagship Dominator. They're moving in standard formation, expecting no real resistance. Lee felt his stomach tighten. Yeah, even with their technological advantages, the odds were still 4-1 against them. But there was no choice now. The Nethari had 5 days left, and the human fleet needed 3 days to reach their space using conventional faster-than-light travel. "All right, people," Lee announced to the assembled officers. "It's time to find out if 3 years of preparation was enough. Captain Moon, take the first battle group and begin immediate departure. Wing Commander Shin, your fighters will fold directly to Nethari space and begin reconnaissance. I want to know exactly where every Vorthan ship is before we engage." "Sir," said Captain Kim Taeyeon, commander of the battlecruiser Retribution. "What are our rules of engagement?" Lee paused, thinking about the question. "In a few days, humanity would either return to galactic affairs as heroes or die as fools. But either way, they would do it on their own terms. We protect Nethari civilians first, always. If Vorthan ships surrender, we accept it. If they fight, we fight back harder. And if they try to harm innocent people, we stop them permanently." Lee's voice grew hard. "The galaxy threw us away once. We're not going to let them do the same thing to people who showed us kindness." Over the next 18 hours, the human fleet departed Haven in small groups, using different routes to avoid detection. To any observer, it would look like scattered merchant traffic or exploration vessels. No one would suspect that humanity was mounting the largest rescue operation in their history. Admiral Lee traveled aboard the flagship Resolution, a magnificent ship that represented everything humans had learned about space combat. As they moved through hyperspace toward Nethari territory, he spent his time reviewing intelligence reports and battle plans. Admiral said his aide, Lieutenant Park Soo-yang, "We're receiving reports from our advanced scouts. The Vorthan fleet has reached the edge of Nethari space and is beginning their final approach to the homeworld. Any sign that they've detected our ships?" "No, sir." "Wing Commander Shin's fighters have been using microfolds to stay hidden while observing Vorthan positions. So far, our stealth systems are working perfectly." Lee looked at the tactical display, showing both fleets. The Vorthans were arranged in a massive formation designed to intimidate and overwhelm. Their ships were huge and powerful, painted in the dark colors that made them look like instruments of death moving through space. In contrast, the human fleet was scattered across a dozen different locations, individual ships and small groups, positioned to strike from unexpected angles. They looked fragile compared to the Vorthan armada, but Lee knew that appearances could be deceiving. "Sir," called Tactical Officer Ujimin, "we're detecting massive energy signatures from the Vorthan flagship. They're powering up their main weapons. Are they targeting the planet?" "No, sir. They're broadcasting on all frequencies." "It looks like they're making their final demand for surrender." Lee listened as the Vorthon Admiral's voice filled their communication system. The words were cold and arrogant, exactly what he expected from people who conquered the weak. "People of Netheri, this is Admiral Kasara of the Vorthon Imperial Fleet. You have 6 hours to begin evacuation of your homeworld. Any ship that remains after that time will be considered hostile and destroyed. This is your final warning." Transmission ended, and Lee felt anger building in his chest. The Vorthan spoke as if the Nethari were insects to be swept aside, not living beings with families and dreams and the right to exist in peace. "Communications, open a channel to all human ships," Lee ordered. "Channel open, sir." Lee's voice carried to every human vessel in the fleet, reaching 18,000 people who had volunteered to risk their lives for aliens most of them had never met. "This is Admiral Lee speaking to all ships and all crews. In a few hours, we're going to do something that will change the galaxy forever. We're going to show everyone that humanity has returned, and we're not the same species they abandoned in deep space." He paused, looking out at the stars that surrounded them. 3 years ago, one alien saved 50,000 human lives because it was the right thing to do. Today, we return that favor. It's not because we have to, but because we choose to. Because that's what humans do. We remember who helps us, and we protect those who can't protect themselves. Lee's voice grew stronger as he continued. The Vorthans think they're fighting helpless civilians and maybe a few outdated defense ships. Have no idea what's coming for them. In 6 hours, they're going to discover that humanity doesn't just survive. We thrive. And when we fight, we don't fight like anyone else in the galaxy. Across the fleet, human crews made final preparations for battle. Weapons were charged, shields were calibrated, and fold drives were brought to full readiness. Fighter bays, 3,000 pilots climbed into their sleek craft, ready to dance through space in ways that would amaze and terrify their enemies. "All ships report ready, Admiral," Captain Moon announced from the bridge of the Gratitude. Lee looked at the chronometer on his display. For hours until the Vorthan deadline. Time enough to get into position and prepare the surprise that would announce humanity's return to galactic affairs. "All units, begin final approach," Lee ordered. "Remember, we don't reveal ourselves until every Nethari civilian is safe. Then we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten people under human protection." As the human fleet moved toward their destiny, Admiral Lee thought about Kretel and wondered if the old alien knew that help was coming. Soon, very soon, the Nethari would learn that their act of kindness had not been forgotten, and the Vorthan Empire would learn why it was dangerous to threaten humanity's friends. Admiral Kasara stood on the bridge of the Vorthon flagship Dominator, watching the peaceful blue world of the Nethari grow larger on his main screen. This would be another easy conquest for the Empire. The Nethari had no military ships, no weapons. Platforms, nothing that could challenge even a single Vorthan destroyer. "Admiral, we're detecting civilian evacuation ships leaving the planet," reported his tactical officer. "Small transports, maybe 50 vessels total?" Kasara nodded with satisfaction. "Let them run. We only want the planet, not a genocide. Though, if they refuse to leave completely, we'll have to make examples." Around the Dominator, 836 other Vorthan warships moved in perfect formation. It was beautiful in its way, like a dark storm cloud rolling through space, toward an undefended world. No force in the galaxy could stand against such power. On the surface of the Nethari homeworld, Kretel stood in the capital city's emergency command center, coordinating the evacuation of his people. At his age, he should have been among the first to leave, but he refused to abandon his post while others still needed help. Elder Kretel, "The last transport ships are almost full," reported his aide, a young Nethari named Veltar. "We can evacuate maybe 60,000 people before the deadline." Kretel felt his heart break. There were over 2 million Athari on the homeworld. Even if they had more time, they didn't have enough ships to save everyone. Continue the evacuation, he said quietly. Save who we can. Outside the command center, families said goodbye to each other. The young and healthy would try to escape on the transport ships. The old and sick would stay behind, hoping the Vorthans would show mercy. Everyone knew it was probably false hope. Elder Velter said suddenly, "We're getting strange readings. On our sensors, something is happening in the outer system." Crotto looked at the display screen, but he couldn't understand what he was seeing. There were flashes of light appearing and disappearing all across the system, too fast for their sensors to track properly. "What could cause readings like that?" he asked. "I don't know, Elder. It's like space itself is tearing apart and healing." Over and over again. High above the planet, Wing Commander Shin Dong-ha led his fighter squadrons through a series of microfolds. Positioning them around the massive Vorthon fleet, his pilots moved like ghosts through space, appearing for seconds at a time to gather intelligence before folding away again. Gold leader to all squadrons, Shin spoke into his communication system. Enemy formation is exactly as predicted. There, overconfident and spread out. Perfect targets for hit-and-run attacks. In his cockpit, fighter pilot Li Juan checked his weapons one final time. The human fighters were small and fast, armed with energy weapons that could punch through the heaviest armor. More importantly, they could appear anywhere and disappear before enemy gunners could react. "All fighters, this is Gold Leader," Shin continued. "Remember, we're not here to destroy their entire fleet. We're here to protect civilians and show them what human fighters can do. Make every shot count. Aboard the flagship Resolution, Admiral." Lee watched the tactical display as his forces moved into final position. The Vorthan fleet was exactly where intelligence had predicted, arranged in a standard formation that looked impressive but had obvious weaknesses. "Admiral, all ships report." "Ready," announced Captain Moon from his position at the tactical station. "The Vorthons still don't know we're here." Lee nodded. The element of surprise was their greatest advantage. Once the Vorthans knew they were facing an organized fleet, the battle would become much harder. Communications open a channel to all. "Human ships," Lee ordered. "Channel open, sir." "This is Admiral Lee to all vessels. Today we show the galaxy that humanity protects those who cannot protect themselves. All units execute Operation Gratitude." Across the system, human ships began to fold through space in perfect coordination. In the span of 30 seconds, 212 vessels appeared at strategic points around the Vorthan formation. On the Dominator, alarms began screaming as sensors detected the sudden appearance of unknown ships. "Admiral," the tactical officer called out in confusion, "we're detecting multiple vessels appearing throughout our formation. I don't understand how they got there." Admiral Kizara stared at his display in shock. Ships were materializing out of nowhere, completely surrounding his fleet. The vessels were sleek and strange, unlike anything in the Vorthon databases. "Who are they?" he demanded. "What species builds ships like that?" Before anyone could answer, the communication system activated. A voice spoke in clear galactic standard, calm and confident. "Vorthan Fleet. This is Admiral Lee Minho of the Human Defense Force. You are ordered to withdraw from Nethari space immediately. This is your only warning." Kasara felt his blood freeze. Humans, the primitive species that the Council had exiled years ago. They were supposed to be dead or scattered across the galaxy as refugees. "Impossible," he whispered. "Humans don't have a fleet. They don't have the technology for ships like these." His tactical officer looked up from his instruments with fear in his eyes. "Admiral, I'm reading energy signatures from the human ships that are off our charts. Their weapons are powered up and ready to fire." Kasara's shock quickly turned to anger. How dare these primitives threaten the Vorthan Empire? He activated his communication system to respond. "Human Admiral, you are interfering with legitimate Imperial business. Withdraw immediately, or face the consequences. You're outnumbered 4-1. Admiral Lee's response came quickly. "Numbers don't mean much when you can't hit what you're..." Shooting at you, have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal. Fire on the human ships, Kesara ordered. Show them what happens when primitives challenge the Empire. The Vorthan fleet opened fire with hundreds of energy cannons and missile launchers. Space lit up with deadly energy as the massive ships tried to destroy their smaller opponents. But the human ships simply weren't there anymore, as the Vorthan weapons fired. Every human vessel folded through space, appearing in new positions where the enemy fire couldn't reach them. Then they fired back. Human energy weapons struck Vorthan ships with incredible precision. Each shot was carefully aimed at weapon systems, engines, and communication arrays. They weren't trying to kill the crews, but to disable the ships and stop the attack. Fighter pilot Li Guan folded his small craft directly above a Vorthan destroyer and fired a burst that took out its main guns. Before the enemy could react, he was gone, appearing behind another ship to disable its engines. Oh, this is impossible. Admiral Kesara shouted as he watched his ships being picked apart by opponents who seemed to be everywhere at once. How are they moving like that? Captain Kim Taeyun, commanding the human battlecruiser Retribution, folded his ship directly in front of the Vorthan flagship. The Resolution was half the size of the Dominator, but its weapons were far more advanced. Vorthan. Admiral Kim's voice came over the communication system. Your flagship is now targeted by every human ship in the system. Surrender or be destroyed. On the planet below, Kretel watched in amazement as the space battle unfolded above his world. The humans were fighting like nothing he had ever seen, appearing and disappearing like spirits of light. More importantly, they were winning. Elder Velter said with wonder in his voice, "The human ships are protecting our evacuation transports. Every time a Vorthan ship tries to target our civilians, a human ship appears to stop them." Kretel felt tears forming in his large eyes. 3 years ago, he had saved some dying humans because it was right. Those same humans had returned with an entire fleet to save his people. The battle continued for 2 hours. But the outcome was never in doubt. Human ships danced through space like deadly angels, striking where they chose and vanishing before the Vorthans could respond. One by one, enemy vessels were disabled or forced to surrender. Finally, Admiral Kesara accepted the inevitable. His fleet was destroyed as a fighting force, and continuing the battle would only result in more casualties. "Human Admiral," he said into his communication system, "the Vorthan fleet surrenders." "Wise choice," Admiral Li replied. "All Vorthon ships will withdraw from Nathari space immediately. Any vessel that returns will be destroyed without warning." As the broken Vorthon fleet limped away from the Nathari homeworld, Admiral Li opened a communication channel to the planet's surface. "This is Admiral Li of the Human Defense Force, calling Elder Kretal of the Nathari. Do you remember us on the planet?" Kretal smiled through his tears as he activated the reply system. "Admiral Li, how could I forget? You were the humans on the dying ship." "That's right, Elder. You saved our lives when no one else would help us. Today we return the favor. The Nathari are now under human protection. Anyone who threatens your people threatens us." Kretel looked around at his aide and the other Nathari in the command center. They were all staring at him with amazement. "And joy," Admiral Kretel said into the communication system. "How can we ever thank you?" Li's response carried the warmth of old friendship across the void of space. "No thanks needed, Elder. You taught us that life is precious in the void. Today we taught the galaxy that humanity never forgets a kindness." 6 months after the Battle of Nathari, Ambassador's son Neon stood in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council on the planet Centralis. The massive hall was filled with representatives from hundreds of species, all waiting to hear what humanity had to say about their dramatic return to galactic affairs. The council chamber looked exactly as Nain remembered from the recordings of humanity's trial. 3 years earlier, the same curved walls, the same elevated speaking platform, the same seats arranged in perfect circles. But everything else had changed. Where once the human delegation had sat in the back as accused criminals, now they occupied the front row reserved for major galactic powers. The other species no longer looked at humans with disgust or dismissal. Now their expressions showed a mixture of respect, fear, and curiosity. The council recognizes Ambassador Sun Nayan of the Human Defense Alliance, announced council speaker. Theravel, tall insectoid being who had voted to exile humanity years before, Nayan walked to the speaking platform, her footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. She carried with her a data tablet containing humanity's demands. Not requests. Demands. Honored council members, she began. 3 years ago, you voted to exile humanity from galactic civilization. You declared us unworthy of membership because we refused to surrender our sovereign rights to the Vorthan Empire. Murmurs spread through the assembled delegates. Everyone remembered that decision. Most had thought it was the end of humanity as a spacefaring species. Today I stand before you as the representative of a people who have grown stronger in exile. We have built new worlds, developed new technologies, and created a military force capable of defeating one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. The Vorthan delegate, Admiral Korthik, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The humiliating defeat at Netheri had cost Admiral Kasara his command and nearly started a civil war within the Empire. But humanity did not return to seek revenge. Nayan continued. We return to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The Battle of Netheri was not about conquest or territory. It was about repaying a debt of gratitude to people who showed us kindness when no one else would. She activated her tablet, and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber showing the aftermath of the battle. Netheri civilians safe on their homeworld. Vorthan prisoners being treated with dignity aboard human ships. Reconstruction efforts beginning immediately. Humanity hereby announces the formation of the Protection Accord, Nahian declared. Any species that faces extinction or enslavement may request human protection. We will evaluate each case based on the threat to innocent life and our ability to help effectively. The chamber erupted in surprise conversations. Several delegates stood up to object, but Council Speaker Theravel called for order. Ambassador, said the Alterian delegate, surely you cannot mean to establish humanity as the galaxy's police force. Not police, Nayan replied calmly. Guardians. We will not interfere in legitimate conflicts or political disputes. But when powerful empires threaten to destroy peaceful civilizations, humanity will act. The Vorthan delegate finally stood up. This is outrageous. The Empire will not tolerate human interference in our internal affairs. Nayan turned to face Admiral Korthik directly. Admiral, I suggest you review the battle records from Netheri space before making threats. Your empire sent 800 ships against us. How many made it home in fighting condition? The Vorthan's face darkened, but he said nothing. Everyone in the chamber knew the answer. Less than 200 Vorthan ships had returned home, and most of those needed months of repairs. The Human Defense Alliance makes the following demands, Nayan announced, reading from her tablet. First, full readmission to the Galactic Council, with voting rights restored. Second, recognition of human authority over all species currently under our protection. Third, establishment of human patrol rights in contested border regions. And if we refuse, asked the Centauri Prime Minister. Nayan smiled, but there was steel in her expression. Then humanity will continue operating outside Council authority. We will protect whoever asks for our help, establish bases wherever we choose, build alliances with whoever shares our values. The choice is yours. The chamber fell silent as delegates realized the implications. Humanity was not asking permission. They were offering the Council a chance to legitimize what was already happening. Council. Speaker Theravel called for a recess to allow private discussions among the delegates. As representatives huddled in urgent conversations, Nayan walked to the observation deck where Admiral Lee was waiting. How do you think it went? Lee asked. They're scared, Nayan replied. Shh, fear will make them reasonable. Through the transparent walls of the observation deck, they could see ships from dozens of species docked at the orbital station, but the largest vessels belonged to humanity. The flagship Resolution floated nearby, its sleek hull gleaming in the light of Centralis's star. Admiral, said Captain Moon, joining them at the observation deck, we're receiving priority messages from 14 different species requesting protection agreements, including 3 that voted to exile us. Lee nodded. Word of humanity's victory had spread quickly through the galaxy. Suddenly, every small civilization that lived in fear of larger neighbors wanted human friends. "What's the situation on Nathari?" Lee asked. "Elder Kretel reports that reconstruction is ahead of schedule," Moon replied.
What?
"The Nathari are adapting human technology for civilian use.
What?
Their cities are being rebuilt stronger than before. Our friend Kretel himself, healthy and happy. He sends his regards and wants to know when you'll visit again." Lee smiled. The old alien had become something like a grandfather figure to the human fleet. His simple act of kindness had changed the course of galactic history. 2 hours later, the council reconvened. Council Speaker Theravel stood at the podium with the results of their deliberations. After extensive discussion, the Galactic Council votes to accept humanity's demands, she announced. "Welcome back to galactic civilization, Ambassador Neon."
Oh.
Chamber filled with polite applause, though some delegates looked less than enthusiastic. Nain returned to the speaking platform for her final statement. "Humanity accepts readmission to the Council," she said. "But we want to be clear about who we are now. We are not the same species you exiled 3 years ago. We have learned that the galaxy can be a cruel place for those without the strength to defend themselves." She paused, looking around the chamber at faces representing hundreds of worlds and billions of lives. "From today forward, humanity stands as a guardian for the weak and protector of the innocent. We remember every kindness shown to us, and we repay our debts. But we also remember every cruelty, every injustice, every time the strong preyed upon the defenseless." The chamber was completely silent now. Every delegate understood they were witnessing a moment that would reshape galactic politics for generations. To those who choose friendship with humanity, you will find no more loyal allies in the galaxy. To those who threaten the innocent, you will find no more dangerous enemies. Neon's voice carried the quiet confidence of absolute certainty. "We are humanity. We have returned. And the galaxy will never be the same." 3 months later, Dr. Park Jisoo stood on the observation deck of Haven's newest orbital station. Watching as the first group of refugee ships arrived in the system, the passengers were Cathari civilians fleeing persecution from the Dominion Empire. They had requested human protection, and humanity had answered. Dr. Park called her assistant medical technician, Kim Young-ho. "The refugee medical teams are ready to begin health screenings." Park nodded, but her attention was drawn to a familiar sight outside the observation deck. Elder Kretal's personal transport was approaching the station. The old Nathari had become humanity's first official ambassador, helping to coordinate refugee assistance programs as she watched Nathari children and Cathari youngsters playing together in the station's recreation areas. Park reflected on how much had changed. 3 years ago, humanity had been dying in the cold of space. Now they were the galaxy's newest major power, with colonies spanning dozens of systems and a fleet that patrolled the space lanes. But the most important change was simpler than technology or military might. Humanity had discovered its true purpose in the galaxy, not to conquer or rule, but to protect and preserve, to ensure that no act of kindness went unrewarded and no cry for help went unanswered. Dr. Young-ho said quietly, "A message just came in from the exploration fleet. They found another system with a habitable world, perfect for the next wave of refugees." Park smiled. The galaxy was full of species that needed safe places to build new lives. Humanity would provide those places, just as they had been provided with Haven when they needed it most. In the distance, she could see the lights of New Sol twinkling on Haven's surface. 100,000 humans had become the nucleus around which a new kind of galactic civilization was forming. Civilization based not on fear or conquest, but on the simple truth that Kretel had taught them long ago. Life was precious in the void. All life and humanity would make sure the galaxy never forgot it. The great debt had been repaid. The Nathari were safe. Humanity had returned to galactic prominence, and the balance of power had shifted forever. But more importantly, the galaxy had learned that some species measured their worth not by what they could take, but by what they were willing to give. And when humanity gave, the whole galaxy felt it.